This is Lecture 9, and it is entitled Intervals and Tunings. Another pep talk. Courage, my friends, courage. Not all of the remaining lectures will be as information-rich and potentially difficult as the previous lecture. Then again, they will not necessarily be all that much easier either. Look, this course was not designed to be listened to once, but rather a number of times, with each listening offering some new set of insights into the musical language. On your first listening, I would suggest you just push on through, gleaning what you can before going back to the beginning. We learn spoken language through repetition, and the same is true for the musical language. We return to our exploration of pitch. Way back at the beginning of our discussion on pitch collections, I made a statement twice that I can now begin to properly explain. First, let's hear that statement again. We will find that the Western pitch collections of the last 400 plus years represent a balance between melody and harmony, a reconciliation of melodic structures and harmonic structures based on the overtone series. Back, please, to Pythagoras and his investigation of how increasingly complex numerical ratios yield increasingly complex pitch relationships or intervals, an investigation into what is now known as the overtone series. Pythagoras Revisited. My friends, when we refer to Pythagoras, we're referring as much to a corporate entity as we are an individual person. I explain. The man Pythagoras lived between roughly 582 and 507 BCE. For our information, in my Bach and Baha'i Baroque course recorded in 1995, I gave Pythagoras' date of death as approximately 497 BCE. That date has now been superseded by circa 507 BCE. For those of you who noticed this discrepancy, I can only say that I stand in awe of your attention to detail. As his approximate birth and death dates indicate, what we actually know about Pythagoras the person can be said in just a few sentences. As we observed in a previous lecture, he migrated from his native Greek island of Samos to the Italian port city of Crotone on the Gulf of Taranto, where he founded a school and religious society that taught, among other things, that the essence of all things and relationships, even abstract concepts like justice, could be understood through numbers and expressed numerically. Pythagoras was worshipped by his students. We're not just talking here about an apple for teacher. Oh no. He came to be considered by his followers, by his disciples, as a demigod, something I personally aspired to but never quite managed to achieve in my own classroom teaching days. Now, not a word, scribble, or jot of Pythagoras' own writings has survived. But since his followers attributed all the doctrines of the Pythagorean cult to Pythagoras himself, it's impossible to distinguish his teachings and discoveries from those Pythagoreans who came after him. This is what I meant when I referred to Pythagoras as a corporate entity, and thus, when I or anyone else attribute doctrines, experiments, and principles to Pythagoras, it's as much the Pythagorean school we're referring to as the individual himself. A quick review of those issues Pythagorean discussed back in Lecture 7. Fairly early in his career, Pythagoras, and yes, in the case of this investigation, it was indeed Pythagoras the man, conducted an investigation into the nature of and the relationships between sounds. Intent on determining what progressively complex numerical ratios actually sounded like, Pythagoras built a monochord, which, for demonstration purposes, is the following pitch on the piano. Pythagoras began at the beginning by asking himself what a one-to-one ratio actually sounded like. So he plucked that original string, and then he plucked it again. My friends, that's what a one-to-one ratio sounds like. It's the same sound. It's a relationship called a unison, unison, meaning one sound. The next step was to divide the string in half and compare the sound produced by half the string to the original, and in doing so, hear what a 2-to-1 ratio sounds like. Here's the original string, and here's the pitch produced when we play half the string. The result is the interval called an octave, thus named because when the term was created, the Western pitch system was divided into the 7-pitch diatonic collections that duplicated themselves above or below on the 8th pitch. Pythagoras did not invent the octave. It is an acoustical phenomenon that has been used in music for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and had been so well before he built his monochord. What Pythagoras did was quantify and identify the octave as the sonic manifestation of the simplest of all numerical ratios, a 2-to-1. Pythagoras didn't stop there, and in doing so, he identified other acoustical phenomena that had also been in use for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Pythagoras came to realize that the simpler the numerical ratio between vibrating bodies, the more blended, and therefore the more consonant the interval, that is, the sonic relationship, between those vibrating bodies. This perception, the simpler the numerical ratio between vibrating bodies, the more consonant they sound, brought about an epiphany for Pythagoras. His investigation into sound contributed mightily toward his own developing belief that the universe and everything in it was expressible and explicable through numbers. Pythagoras didn't stop at the octave, and neither shall we. He next divided his monochord into thirds and compared the sound produced by half the string with the sound produced by a third of the string, creating a 3-to-2 ratio. Here, my friends, is what a 3-to-2 ratio sounds like. First, here's half the string, and this is the sound produced by 1/3 of the string. Let's hear those pitches played both consecutively and together, melodically and harmonically. That's a very powerful and primal sound. It's certainly more complex than an octave. After all, the two pitches do not blend together into a single pitch. We do perceive them as two separate pitches. But there is nevertheless a directness, a sort of primal sensibility to the sound of that interval that relates directly to its acoustic simplicity, a 3-to-2 ratio. The interval is called a fifth because the second pitch, the one created by plucking 1/3 of the string, lies 5 diatonic scale steps above the pitch created by plucking half the string. Let's make sure, please, that we're all clear on this. If the original string sounds like this, then half the string lies 8 diatonic scale steps or an octave above, and 1/3 of the string lies 5 diatonic scale steps, or what's called the interval of a fifth, above that. Pythagoras continued. He divided the string into quarters and compared the sound created by 1/4 of the string to that produced by 1/3 of the string, a 4-to-3 ratio. Here's what he got. First, here's 1/3 of the string. Remember, it yielded this pitch. And 1/4 of the string yielded this pitch. This, then, is what a 4-to-3 ratio sounds like. Those two pitches span 4 diatonic scale steps. 1, 2, 3, 4. This interval, this 4-to-3 ratio, then, is called a fourth. Pythagoras was so taken with the primal power of the first 3 intervals he had discovered in order of increasing numerical complexity, the octave, the fifth, and the fourth, that he deemed them, along with the unison, as being the perfect intervals, meaning the prime or essential intervals. For our information, the terms octave, fifth, and fourth, and other such numerical intervallic designations came into use during the 14th and 15th centuries. Before that, they were identified using their Greek names. The Greek term for octave was diapason, which means through all the tones. The Greek term for the fifth was diapente, meaning through 5 tones, and the Greek term for a fourth was diatessaron, meaning through 4 tones. Having discovered the octave, fifth, and fourth, the diapason, diapente, and diatessaron, Pythagoras took a time out and marveled at what he had discovered. Using a C major collection, the white keys on the piano, let's share something of Pythagoras' wonder. In C major, the pitch C is the tonic, the tonal center, around which all the other pitches rotate, like the planets around the sun. Having said that, the other 6 pitches in a diatonic collection are not equal. Oh no, there is a hierarchy, and pride of place in that hierarchy goes, first and foremost, to the perfect intervals. Question: after the tonic pitch, what is the most important pitch in a diatonic collection? Answer: the pitch of perfect fifth, or a 3:2 ratio above that tonic pitch. In C major, that pitch a fifth above would be a G. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, C, D, E, F, G. In any diatonic collection, we call the fifth scale degree, the pitch a perfect fifth above the tonic, the dominant pitch. The dominant, because of its special 3:2 ratio relationship with the tonic, is the second most important pitch in any diatonic collection. And while I get way ahead of myself, I would point out, for now, that the chords or harmonies built atop these 2 pitches, the tonic and dominant chords, are the essential harmonies in any diatonic collection, as the tension between them defines the tonic. The chord built atop the dominant pitch creates tension. A tension that can only be released and relieved by a resolution to the chord built atop the tonic. The perfect fourth, representing a 4:3 ratio, is, after the octave and the perfect fifth, the most primal interval. So another question: after the dominant pitch, what is the next most important pitch in a diatonic collection? Answer: the pitch a perfect fourth above the tonic pitch. In C major, that pitch would be an F. 1, 2, 3, 4, C, D, E, F. In any diatonic collection, we call the fourth scale degree, the pitch a fourth above the tonic, the subdominant, meaning just below the dominant. The subdominant, because of its 4:3 ratio relationship to the tonic, is, after the tonic and dominant pitches, the third most important pitch in any diatonic collection. Once again, we get ahead of ourselves, but I am honor-bound to point out that in the phrase, section, and movement-ending harmonic punctuation marks called cadences that characterize any piece of tonal music, the chord or harmony built atop the subdominant pitch will typically precede the dominant chord, which then almost always resolves to the tonic chord. For example, I will play the subdominant pitch, followed by the dominant pitch, followed by the tonic pitch of a major collection. Those 3 pitches represent, in order, the subdominant, dominant, and tonic pitches, the fourth, fifth, and first pitches of this C major collection. So we would call this a 4-5-1 progression. I will play that same pitch progression in the bass, now with the appropriate chord or harmony built atop the pitches, creating a 4-5-1 chord progression. My friends, we ask rhetorically, is there a more familiar harmonic progression in all of Western music? This harmonic progression, moving as it does in order of increasing importance through the three most important chords built on the three most important pitches in any given diatonic collection, 4, 5, and 1, is the defining tonal element of any diatonic collection. By hearing its three most important pitches in order of increasing importance and the chords or harmonies built atop those pitches, that collection and its tonic pitch are planted in our ears as firmly as if they had been etched in our stirrup bones. Now, admittedly, this tonal harmony stuff wasn't invented, codified, and standardized until some 2,000 years after Pythagoras' death. But the roots of the tonal harmonic system lie in the diatonic modes of the ancient world. The point: the tonic, subdominant, and dominant pitches, the 1, 4, and 5, are the acoustical pillars that hold up any diatonic collection, except for the Lydian and Locrian modes. Sidebar: why the Lydian and Locrian modes are the unfortunate stepchildren of the diatonic collections. You know, this is as good as any time to explain properly why the Lydian mode is of limited use and the Locrian mode of almost no use in tonal music. As a reminder, the Lydian mode encompasses the white keys of a piano from an F to an F, and it sounds like this. The Lydian mode is a bright-sounding mode with a major third between its tonic pitch and its third scale degree. But it's got a flaw. It's a flaw that renders it only marginally useful in traditional tonal music. You see, the interval from its tonic pitch upwards to its subdominant pitch, from 1 to 4, is not a perfect fourth, but rather an interval one semitone wider called an augmented fourth or a tritone. Here, my friends, would be a perfect fourth. Here's an augmented fourth, one semitone wider. Again, a perfect fourth. Again, an augmented fourth, one semitone wider. This augmented fourth, or tritone, is an extremely dissonant interval. And like a supermodel without her drugs, it's extremely unstable. It wants to resolve. In a Lydian mode, the augmented fourth between the tonic and subdominant, between 1 and 4, renders unstable, that is, dissonant, a basic relationship that should be stable and consonant. The perfect fourth between the tonic and subdominant provides stability. The augmented fourth or tritone between the tonic and subdominant in the Lydian mode is about as stable as an inebriate on a pogo stick. For our information, the numbers. A perfect fourth is a sonic manifestation of a 4:3 ratio. An augmented fourth, or tritone, is a manifestation of a 45:32 ratio. The reason why the interval of an augmented fourth is also called a tritone is that it spans 6 semitones or 3 whole steps. 3 whole steps equals a tritone. The Locrian mode is even less useful than the Lydian mode for similar reasons. As a reminder, the Locrian mode is a dark-sounding collection that encompasses the white keys of a piano from a B to a B. The Locrian mode sounds like this. In the Locrian mode, the interval from its tonic pitch upwards to its dominant pitch, from 1 up to 5, is not a perfect fifth, but rather an interval 1 semitone narrower, an interval called a diminished fifth, which also happens to be a tritone. My friends, here's a perfect fifth. Here's a diminished fifth, 1 semitone narrower. Again, a perfect fifth. Diminished fifth. This diminished fifth, this tritone, is, as we know, an extremely dissonant interval, and as such, It is extremely unstable. It wants to resolve. In a Locrian mode, the diminished fifth, or the tritone, between the tonic and dominant pitches, between 1 and 5, renders unstable what should be the most stable and important relationship in any diatonic collection, that being the tonic pitch and the dominant pitch a perfect fifth above it. The diminished fifth, the tritone, between tonic and dominant, between 1 and 5 in a Locrian mode, renders the collection de facto useless. The Locrian mode exists, but like the radish rosette slicer in your kitchen's junk drawer, no one actually uses it. Sidebar over, back to Pythagoras. Tetrachords galore. Pythagoras marveled. In all the modes excepting the Lydian and Locrian, the dominant and subdominant pitches bisected the diatonic collections into 2 consecutive tetrachords, 2 equal groupings of 4 pitches. As an example, let's use the Aeolian mode from A to A, an A minor collection as an example. From the tonic pitch A up to the subdominant pitch D is the distance of a perfect fourth that also encompasses within it 4 pitches, a tetrachord, tetra being Greek for 4. A, B, C, D. 1, 2, 3, 4. From the dominant pitch E back up to the tonic pitch A is also an interval of a perfect fourth that also encompasses within it 4 pitches, another tetrachord. E, F, G, A. 1, 2, 3, 4. These 2 consecutive tetrachords were called adjacent or disjunct tetrachords because they sit side by side, separate from each other, A, B, C, D, and then E, F, G, A. But even more interesting to ancient Greek and medieval theorists was the fact that certain diatonic modes consisted of 2 interlocking or conjunct tetrachords. For example, back to the Aeolian mode, an A minor collection. From the tonic pitch A to the subdominant pitch D is a distance of a perfect fourth, A, B, C, D. From the D up to a G, the G being the 7th and final pitch of the Aeolian mode, is another perfect fourth, D, E, F, G. These interlocking or conjunct tetrachords together add up to 7 pitches, a unit the Greeks called a heptachord, a 7-pitch entity, meaning a diatonic collection. The larger point: the Greek modes were the product of thousands of years of musical evolution. Instinctively, these modes gravitated around the octave, the perfect fifth, and the perfect fourth. It would seem that we Homo sapiens, and this is true in most world music cultures, not just in the West, are instinctively drawn to the perfect intervals, the octave, fifth, and fourth, in the same way we're drawn to primary colors, straight lines, and circles, as those elements most easily perceived and remembered as the basic building blocks of musical languages. Tuning systems and the evolution of the chromatic collection. Much of what Pythagoras and his followers, as well as such other Greek music theorists as Aristoxenus, Archytas, Ptolemy, and Cleonides, were trying to do was to come up with a rational explanation for musical practice as it existed at their time. Of course, in a world in which the vast majority of music went unnotated, where tunings and melodic practices varied sometimes from town to town, this was in reality an impossible task. But in their search for rational explanation and systemic organization, these and other ancient musician theorists began a process of investigation and codification that, when gathered up, summarized, and transmitted to Western Europe during the early Middle Ages, became the basis for tuning systems as they exist to this very day. Let's trace that development. We return to our corporate Pythagoras. This corporate Pythagoras was fascinated by the sonic manifestation of a 3-to-2 ratio, by the perfect fifth. The perfect fifth was, at once, the simplest interval in the universe that wasn't self-duplicating. I explain. As a reminder, the simplest possible relationship between pitches, as explicated by Pythagoras, is the unison, a 1-to-1 relationship, which is the same pitch. Let us pretend, for a moment, that Pythagoras was lucky enough to have a modern grand piano at his disposal. Having discovered that unison, he might very well have asked himself whether unisons alone offered enough pitch variety to create a complete and viable musical experience. Sitting down at his piano, Pythagoras commenced to make music with unisons only. Yeah, groovy though Pyman's rhythms may have been. As a pitch thing goes, the unison is not happening. A unison simply does not supply enough pitch variety to make a complete musical experience. So, okay, Pythagoras says, a single unison by itself is pitch Dullsville. So, let's check out the octave. Let's check out a series of pitches, a 2-to-1 ratio apart, and let's see if various octave duplicates can supply enough pitch variety to make a complete musical experience. My friends, with all due respect, you have to be pretty wasted to perceive that as a complete musical experience. There's just not enough pitch variety in a musical system based entirely on octaves of the same pitch. So Pythagoras, at this point, having a heck of a good time with the grand piano we've loaned him, I gotta get me one of these babies, decides to stack some perfect fifths to see if moving by consecutive 3-to-2 ratios will produce enough pitch variety to create a complete and indeed a viable musical experience. So Pythagoras starts with this F. Okay? A perfect fifth above that F is this C. A perfect fifth above that C is this G. A perfect fifth above that G is a D. Whoa. Unlike the interval of an octave, a perfect fifth does not duplicate itself. Instead, every time we move up, or down for that matter, by a perfect fifth, a new pitch is produced. The corporate entity that was Pythagoras made a stunning discovery. Start on a pitch, stack 6 perfect fifths above that starting pitch, take those 7 pitches and place them all within the span of 1 octave, and what do you get? You get the white keys on the piano. You get all the pitches necessary to construct the 7 diatonic modes. This collection of 7 pitches, what are in essence the white keys on the piano, became known as the Pythagorean collection, the pitch collection that was the basis for all Western musical language during the Middle Ages. The tuning system that creates the Pythagorean collection is called just intonation, and it consists of 6 consecutive perfect fifths. And every now and then, my friends, we'll have the opportunity to hear a performance of medieval chant or dance sung and or played by specialists employing just intonation. The system of diatonic modes made possible by the Pythagorean collection and just intonation served Western music quite nicely until the expressive revolution of the 14th and 15th centuries, a period spanning the end of the Middle Ages and the beginning of the Renaissance. Now let's think about this for just a moment. With the octave divided into 7 different pitches, a la the Pythagorean collection, how many different major collections are there? The answer: only one. the Ionian mode, the white keys on a piano from C to C. Likewise, with the octave divided into only 7 different pitches, how many different minor collections are there? Again, only one, the Aeolian mode, the white keys on a piano from A to A. Increasingly, during the High Middle Ages and the early Renaissance, this was not enough. As the harmonic system developed, as composers desired to create longer pieces of music, as the modes increasingly fell out of favor with the exception of Ionian and Aeolian modes, what came to be referred to as major and minor, something had to be done to increase the pitch resources available to composers. To reuse our crayon analogy, it's at moments like this that the good people at Crayola will retire 10 old colors and create 50 new colors. Well, speaking broadly, that's precisely what music theoreticians, aestheticians, instrument builders, composers, and performers began to do during the 14th and 15th centuries. Expand the available pitch resources available to Western music. Initially, this took the form of raising or making sharp, or lowering, or making flat, certain pitches of a mode in order to avoid a particular dissonance, or to make a melody line smoother, or simply to make something sound better, what was called a causa pulchritudinis, meaning literally doing something for the sake of beauty. Ultimately, these incidental modifications of the modes gave way to a wholesale rethinking of Western pitch resources and tuning. To make a long and complicated story as short as possible, the theorists and aestheticians of the Renaissance and the early Baroque went back to the musical drawing board and continued to stack perfect fifths one upon the next, building, as they did, upon the 7-pitch Pythagorean collection. And lo and behold, another stunning discovery was made. After rising through 5 more pitches, each a perfect fifth above the last, the 13th pitch was the same as the first pitch. Check it out. Starting on a C, let's rise through successive perfect fifths, moving through what is called the circle of fifths. We will hear 12 different pitches before arriving smack dab back where we began, on a C. First, I'm going to play it saying pitch names, and the second time I'm going to play it without saying anything. C, G, D, A, E, B, F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp, E flat, F, back to C. Let me play it again, and this time I'll count 1 to 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, back to C. 12 different pitches, and then back to where we began. Incredible, fantastic, the mystical number 12. There are 12 hours in the AM and 12 hours in the PM. The new day begins at 12 midnight. There are 12 months in a year. Both the Western and Chinese zodiac have 12 signs. Further, the Chinese use a 12-year cycle for reckoning time. There are 12 eggs in a dozen, 12 dozen in a gross, and 12 ounces in a troy pound. There were 12 tribes in ancient Israel. Jesus had 12 apostles. There are 12 days of Christmas. My friends, Eastern Orthodoxy observes 12 great feasts. In Shia Islam, there are 12 imams. In ancient Greece, the principal gods of the pantheon were the 12 Olympians. There are 12 ribs in the human body, 12 labors of Hercules, and in the United States, 12 people on a jury. The 5 new pitches were added as the black keys on the keyboard. And there you have it. Neat as a pin, a closed 12-pitch universe generated through a circle of fifths. Except, I just hate having to be the killjoy here, but there is one little problem. Isn't there always one little problem? You see, if we move upwards through this circle of perfect fifths of 3-to-2 sonic ratios, when we get to the 13th pitch, we get to a pitch that's actually about an eighth of a tone sharper than the one on which we began. Oh, so close! Well, the promise of an octave divided into 12 different pitches, a semitone apart, was too good. So the solution to this little tuning problem was to temper or shrink all or some of these fifths so that the 13th pitch would indeed be the same as the first. One of the first attempts to temper or shrink the fifths created a system called mean tone tuning, a tuning system dating to about 1500. In the mean tone tuning system, some fifths were tempered while others were not, with the result being that some intervals were considerably more in tune than others, which, my friends, is a nice way of saying that under certain circumstances, mean tone tuning sounds as bad as my wife's cat in a blender. Well-tempered tuning came into use during the 17th century. A well-tempered tuning is one in which all of the fifths are tempered almost exactly the same, with minute differences in the tuning, making some keys darker or brighter than others without rendering them as out of tune as in a mean tone tuning. By the 1850s, a system called equal temperament had become the standard and remains the standard to this day. In equal temperament, each of the fifths is tempered to exactly the same degree. Instead of representing a true 3-to-2 ratio, the fifths in an equally tempered collection are 2/100ths of a semitone flat. Do we notice this? No. We've become completely accustomed to the slightly shrunken fifths of equal temperament. The chromatic collection revisited. The equal tempered system divides the octave into 12 equal semitones. Taken all together, it's a marvelous system, the product of virtually thousands of years of experimentation and experience. Yes, the system is limited to but 12 different pitches, something bemoaned by that perpetually dissatisfied few, but for the rest of us, it represents wonderfully that balance between melody and harmony, between melodic phenomena and harmonic phenomena based on the overtone series that we've talked so much about during these last 3 lectures. Because it divides the octave into 12 equal divisions, 12 equal semitones, the chromatic collection is what we call a symmetrical collection. It is divisible into equal segments by factors of 2, 3, 4, and 6. But even more important, the equal-tempered system, and this is true as well of the various well-tempered tunings that preceded equal temperament. The equal-tempered system allows us to build any diatonic collection starting on any one of the 12 different pitches. Just sticking with the Ionian and Aeolian modes, with major and minor, this means that the chromatic collection allows for the construction of 12 major collections and 12 minor collections, with each collection beginning on another of the 12 different pitches of the chromatic. Let's think about it. A major collection has an intervallic profile of TTS, TTTS, whole tone, semitone, whole tone, semitone. In theory, then, we should be able to build a major collection starting on any pitch of the chromatic, provided that we progress by the formula, by the intervallic profile of TTS, TTTS. And this is indeed the case. For example, let's say we wanted to build a major collection starting on the pitch D. Well, simple enough. Think the piano keyboard, and think the intervallic profile of a major collection. TTS, TTTS. D is the tonic pitch. What pitch is a whole tone? That's 2 semitones above a D. An E. What pitch is a whole tone above an E? Let's count. It's 1 semitone up to an F and another semitone up to the black key above the F to an F sharp. So the third scale degree of a D major collection is an F sharp. Question: why not call it a G flat? G flat is, after all, the enharmonic equivalent of an F sharp, the same pitch, right? Answer: the third scale degree of a diatonic collection that starts on a D will have to be some sort of F, D, E, F, 1, 2, 3. It's spelled as an F sharp and not as a G flat because it's the third degree of a D collection. Back to business. We're in the process of building a D major collection by using the intervallic profile of a major collection, TTS, TTTS. The first three pitches are D, E, F sharp. According to the intervallic profile, the fourth scale degree of a major collection lies a semitone above the third. A semitone above an F sharp is a G. A whole tone above a G is an A. A whole tone above an A is a B. A whole tone above a B is a C sharp. And finally, a semitone above a C sharp is a D. Let's hear the whole thing. A D major collection played as an upwards scale. So, back to the statement made just a few moments ago. The chromatic collection created by both well-tempered and equal-tempered tuning allows for the construction of 12 major collections and 12 minor collections. We can build a major or minor collection starting on any of the 12 different pitches of the chromatic. For example, there are 12 different major collections. Here, let me play them for you as upwards scales. We'll start with C major. D flat major, D major, E flat major, E major, F major, F sharp or G flat major, G major, A flat major, A major, B flat major, B major. Thus, among other various modes and collections, the chromatic collection permits the construction of 24 different major and minor collections or keys in which to reside and between which to transit. This matrix of 12 major and 12 minor pitch collections is an extraordinary system, at once complex enough to challenge the greatest musical minds and yet simple enough, with only 12 divisions of the octave, as opposed to 17 or 24, to be accessible and sonically comprehensible to pretty much anyone. A concluding opinion. One of the many idiotic claims made in the spirit of contemporary musical PC explains the global proliferation of Western music as merely another example of patriarchal, hegemonistic Euro-imperialism, and that had China or India or Korea, for example, come to control the world's media instead of the West, well, then the principal global music would be Chinese, Indian, or Korean. I would ask anyone who really believes this to explain then the proliferation of Western-style orchestras, opera houses, chamber music organizations, and conservatories across China, India, and Korea, to name just a few ostensibly non-Western countries that have embraced Western concert music. Is the popularity and proliferation of Western concert music simply a function of Western media dominance? Or is there something intrinsic to the language and expressive content of Western concert music that makes it irresistible to people everywhere? My friends, I eat chocolate. I love chocolate. Does that make me an Aztecophile, a sellout to my own American culture? No, chocolate is good. My family and I frequent a local Szechuan restaurant because the food is superb. We even held our wedding rehearsal dinner there way back when. Does that make us Szechuanophiles, sellouts to our own, in this case, most dubious American gastronomic culture? No, of course not. It means that if something works for us, we may embrace it and make it our own. Thus, my friends, the Western musical tradition, considered as broadly as we please, shorn increasingly over the last 500 years of purely ritual and religious connotations that would have limited its consumption, having produced a vast and varied repertoire of increasingly personalized and self-expressive music based on a chromatic pitch system that allows for tremendous compositional complexity and sophistication that is still accessible to even the untrained ear. the Western chromatic system and the music created using that system works. That so-called Western concert music has transcended the geographical region of its creation, is not a function of imperial hegemonistic Euro-paternalism, but a result of certain qualities and an expressive flexibility intrinsic to this music, qualities and a flexibility that have given it a near universal appeal. Thank you.